All of a sudden, this truck ahead of us pulls over and kind of blocks us, and Wes starts to go around. And about then, two guys got out of the truck, jumped in, and forced themselves into our van. One of them sat right next to me, and they pulled out their guns, and it was a robbery. So I'll never forget. Guy wasn't happy that I had put a lot of my money into my suitcase, so he wasn't happy, and he pulled out. He actually loaded the gun.
Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire.
Oh, you're trying to bring me down and run me out of town. You're taking what you want, but you can't take my rhythm now. I'm walking to my own beat, just gonna be me. I'm not replicating nobody.
Hank Schneider, associate staff from my last church that I was at in student ministry. The thing I like a lot about Hank is he's older than me. And there's not many people older than me, man, you know, especially in student ministry. I mean, there are guys, and here's something you need to know about student ministry. And I heard this years ago from a guy that many of you have heard of. His name was Doug Fields from Saddleback Church out in California. And one thing Doug said is that it doesn't matter how old your staff people are, because if they're young at heart, students pick up on that. If they like and love students, students pick up on that. And that is true. And it's especially true in middle school ministry. But Hank was in high school ministry with me all those years. I think there's a couple times you came and helped me out with middle school.
Right.
But most of the time he was in high school.
Say, I'd like to add something to that. Doug, I promised you years ago that as long as you were at Trinity, I would still be there. Well, guess what? I'm still there and you're not anymore.
That's right.
So I kept my promise.
You kept your promise, and I had made no promises because I never knew when God was going to move me.
That's true.
I knew better, but that's really true, and that's a big deal. And Hank's really a faithful guy. He is so faithful. Now, we'll get on a little sports thing here, too.
Oh, yeah.
And that was this. Now, I came in from North Carolina, went to Appalachian State University, spent a couple of years in Oklahoma, and my theory is wherever I move, that's who wins the state championships.
All right.
Or the national championships. And so Oklahoma was, they've won it many times when I wasn't there, but they won when I was out there. And then I moved to Florida, been here most of my life. Some of my guys, and the funny thing is, Hank, and I thought about this the other day, I ended up being on the Gator side of things. But when I started out, I said, listen, I can be bought. And when Hank started going to me, what are you going to that Florida State stuff for? And so Jason Magus, who he and I, one of our former students, ended up going to Florida State, Bradley Blake, and quite a few other guys. But the funny thing was, Hank, I still love Bobby Bowden. Bobby Bowden is probably one of the greatest youth directors, one of the greatest youth workers who just happened to be a coach.
Yeah.
And then we knew a lot of our students we worked with ended up being Florida State football players.
Yeah, that's true.
But Hank said, we got to start doing this Gator game. So every year for years and years, we saw the Danny Warfel stuff. We saw the Tim Tebow stuff. And we are very appreciative and thankful.
Yeah, you said you could be bought, so I bought
you. That's right. I said, I'm from out of state. I can be bought. And so that happened. But listen, Hank, you were with us. So tell us this. Start here. Give us the number one influencer in your teenage years, that one person that influenced you more than anyone else.
That'd be easy. That's my dad. He admired him. Quick story on my dad. When he was in 10th grade, his father contracted tuberculosis. My dad, this is talking about in the early 1900s. My dad was born in 1896. So anyway, when his dad came home with tuberculosis, he had to quit school in 10th grade, got a job best he could, take care of the family, and was in didn't luckily fight in World War I, but he was in the Army in World War I, Camp Knox, Kentucky. But anyway, I just admired him for all he did, and he always had great things to tell you, and just he loved me. And I remember one time I was kind of, how parents, sometimes the kids feel weird about their parents showing up for stuff, and I felt a little bit weird when he'd come to my football games when I was in middle school. And then years later, I talked to a guy that I was good friends with, and I was telling him about that, and he says, Hank, I really loved your dad. I said, really? He said, yeah, he would come to your games. I wish my father would have done that. And I went, oh, man.
Yeah, and that is, we go back and forth with that. Usually our friends are more appreciative of what our parents do than we are.
Yeah, that's true.
Especially if they don't have parents that are showing up for things like that.
Yeah.
And that transfers to student ministries.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the story. You're the old guy in the group. He is at sports events. I mean, there was no place that Hank wouldn't sacrifice to be. Did a lot of things for students individually. You had a big heart, Hank. You still have a big heart. The big thing that Doug Field said was when he got one of his best youth workers, was 70 years old. He had to beg him to do it. In fact, he wouldn't do it for Doug. 2 little rising freshmen went to this guy and said, would you be our youth leader? Would you come and start helping? And he said, yeah, I will. and Fields went, I couldn't believe it. I've got my master's degree and all this stuff, and I couldn't get this guy to volunteer for us, but I spent these 2 little whippersnappers, and he could not say no to them. But the key to that was this. One of them played soccer, and on one Sunday, she said, would you come to my soccer game today? And he said, well, sure. He said, is your dad going? She says, no, my parents can't come. They're too busy today. And he said, where's your dad? And so he went to his dad, to her dad, and said, hey, I understand you're not going to your girl's soccer game today. He said, what is your problem? He said, old guys can say that to young guys. If it was any other person, he couldn't do that. But he went to that dad. Of course, the dad went to the soccer game that day because kids need to have their parents there. They need us volunteers, but more than us volunteers, they need their parents. And that doesn't happen, and that's where we come in.
Yeah.
So, Hank, thanks for telling us about that. Let's talk about your best moments in student ministry. Yeah.
Oh boy, there's a few of them, but I'd say all in all was if I had to pick one, it would be meeting and getting to know a dynamite guy by the name of Jason Magus. The guy was just on fire for the Lord, and actually he influenced me. That was about the time that I finally dawned on me that I'd grown up in the Episcopal Church, not putting them down, but I didn't really learn about accepting the Lord. And I kept seeing all of this stuff going on, and then finally one day just dawned on me, I've never accepted the Lord in my heart. So I did, and not too soon after that, we had a get-together over at the Verkites, and I was baptized in the Verkites, where a lot of the kids were done at the same time. And Jason was just unreal, and the time I loved the most about him was the trip Hurricane Andrew. He went to Doug after Hurricane Andrew had hit South Florida and said, if I get a group of students, can we go down to South Florida? And Doug said, yeah, I'm sure. I've got a pastor down there. We can stay at his church. And Doug's thinking 2-3 weeks maybe. He comes back, the next day? And so he tells Doug, I've got how many? Well, he had about 30, 40 students. It was amazing. And we went down there and I got to tell the story. I love it about Jason. We had meeting out at his house one time with the youth. His mother says, Jason, by the way, he says, your bedroom is terrible, Jason. It looks like a tornado went through. Well, guess what? That night, a tornado hit his house.
I see. Now, I did not know that was the sequence of events. I remember getting a call from him. Can you guys come help us? A tornado hit. I woke up and the roof was gone above my bed. He said I was laying there trying to go to sleep and it was gone.
But anyway, it was just, I had to laugh at that. But Jason, just a dynamite guy, and meeting him was probably one of the best. A lot of good times, but that was definitely one of the better ones.
Yeah, he was definitely an influencer. And once again, we talked about him getting me up to Florida State, but obviously you didn't care that much for him. You still
I made sure Doug went to have Florida games. So
That's right. Jason still carries that kind of weight in his business life, his family life. So what were some other things, some other highlights?
One thing I wanted to say was early on in life, probably 8 years old, I was out swimming in the Pacific Ocean. I'd never been out there before, and undertow got me. And I thought I wasn't coming up, and God definitely saved my life at that point. Then later on in my later years, I guess I was in my 30s, same thing happened. And this time I swear I was a goner. I had one breath left, and I came up. And I said, praise God. Of course, I thank God every day since then that he saved me. But I always wondered in the back of my head, now why, thank you, God, for saving me, but was there a particular reason you saved me, or you just wanted to save me in general? I'm glad he did, whatever it was. But then one day, it hit me. It's like I'm going to tap on my head. Hey, come on, McFly. Hello. He wanted you to work with youth. Because here I am, a guy, I've never been married, never had kids, always wanted kids, but never was blessed. And so I started working with youth. And then first thing we did with the youth, well, we did go to Gatlinburg. That was a lot of fun. And it was a great conference. But then one of the best things we did after Hurricane Andrew happened, later on, we went to Guatemala on a trip, and it blew me away, the garbage dump ministry with, what was Lisbeth, that was her name?
Lisbeth Pietra Santa.
Yeah, and amazing. She worked with the kids and taught the boys masonry and other types of things, and taught the girls sewing, I guess, and all kind of things that could help. But right there in the middle of the garbage dump, where they got, how many people were living in that dump?
6,000 to 7,000.
Wow.
And this is a major city. There's millions in this city. I'm glad you brought that up, because my philosophy was one day in the garbage dump was equal to the other 9 days we spent in Guatemala.
Yeah,
because we spent 10 days there. And most of the days were spent up in Comitancillo at the missions project that our church was doing with 40,000 Mayan Indians, which we would see on market day.
And let me tell you real quickly what happened. Flew back home, and it was this first, I remember, I'm a big sports guy, and it was the start of the Olympics, where the first time they were going to allow the Dream Team, which was professional basketball players, to play basketball. And I was so excited. So we're going to get back in time. So we got the bus, and we got back in time for me to see the start of that basketball game. And quick story said, so I got ready for the game. Well, get me something. So I went out and bought me a steak, baked potato, came home. I'll take a shower before everything comes on. I got turned on the water in the shower. Wow, it hit me. I got down on my knees and just thank you, God, for letting me be born here and not in Guatemala. It just blew me away. Here was all these people that are eating garbage, literally eating garbage and living in garbage. And I'm sitting there taking a shower, getting ready to eat a steak and a baked potato and watch a game on TV. And I said, thank you, Lord. Thank you so much for what you did.
The one thing that I've noticed on those mission trips over the years, that it affects the students for a lifetime, but it impacts the adults that we took even more and quicker, because you understand the full gamut of an adult life and then being in there.
Yeah.
And so that's huge, Hank. That's huge.
And one other thing I wanted to mention. Now, this wasn't really a missions or a youth trip, but I went down a second time to Guatemala with our Rotary Club. We were going to help them. We had some money. We were going to help them. We had helped them build the library, first mission trip with the kids, but then we were going to go down and help get the buy books and stuff, get the library started. And an interesting thing happened on the way. We went in the van with Wes Collins and the missionary, and his kids went up, and then 4 of us from the Rotary Club. And we're tooling along on the road. And what had happened was every time we'd hit a bump in that van, cheap van, the horn would go off. And we'd have to pound the horn to get it to stop. On the way up there, all of a sudden, this truck ahead of us pulls over and kind of blocks us, and Wes starts to go around. And about then, two guys got out of the truck, jumped in, and forced themselves into our van. One of them sat right next to me, and they pulled out their guns, and it was a robbery. So I'll never forget. Guy wasn't happy that I had put a lot of my money into my suitcase, so he wasn't happy. And he pulled out, he actually loaded the gun and went, uh-oh. And about then he did find my credit card. And from what I understand, I didn't know it at the time, Jim Ferguson was sitting next to me. I mean, he actually handed him some money or something, so it made him happy. So anyway, what I did not know, and this comes back to what I was telling you first about the van, Of course, I didn't speak Spanish. The first thing they told Wes is, do not blink your lights or blow your horn. And we hit bump after bump after bump, and the horn never went off. And so we got they finally got, through robbing us, they brought us into the woods. First sign I saw, good thing, he held up the key. He took the keys from Wes, but then he held them up and it showed him where he's putting them. I said, well, I guess if he's showing him where he's putting them, he's not going to kill us. The guy comes back in, one of the guys that was sitting next to me, as he got out, he knocked the cooler over. He picks up the cooler and apologizes for knocking the cooler over. Then, as soon as we cranked up the van and started back out, the horn went off. And Wes told us about it at that point and went, oh my gosh. Well, his oldest daughter, was it Amalia? Anyway, his oldest daughter actually wrote that story up and sent it to Guidepost, and it was printed.
Oh, I'm sure it was. It was. I remember the one thing I was thankful for is that we didn't have students on that trip.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because most of our trips that we did with student ministry, I did with organizations like Mission Discovery. We did 5 years of Guatemala trips there. They were amazing. I'm glad we did it. The amazing thing about that trip was, and it's still going on, but it was a little too much for us as far as taking general students down there, because I like the safety of the Mission Discovery, but I was the one who suggested we do the garbage dump, which is probably the most unsafe part of the trip, but it was the most lifetime impacting part. Thanks for bringing that up, man. That's amazing. What else do you have there, Hank?
I started out and said I never had any children. Well, I did have a foster son, and I was at one of our youth nights we met, and I going to give this boy a ride home to his house, and he started talking about everything that's going on in his life, and I said, you know what? He said he was looking for another foster father, and I said, well, you know what? Okay, I kept killing. I said, I don't know if it's God or Satan, but one of them said I need to ask Sal if he wants to come live with me, and he did. And a long thing through process, but we went through the court and everything. And I was so proud of him in the end that he joined the Marine Corps, and his story was that when he was growing up, he never knew his father. Well, he did know his father, but his father left at an early age, and he never saw him again. Sal eventually had a child of his own, and he raised that boy and himself and made sure he was there for him.
Yes, yeah, he did. Very much so. And a lot of that was your influence. You've always been a giver. You've always been a caretaker for people. Now
I'm currently a substitute teacher. I love it, believe it or not. It's just been a blessing to me. It really has been.
Hank, tell us, what would you say to youth workers to give them advice today to help them go farther, go longer?
Like you said, I guess in the beginning, I said, get to know them and love them. Love on them and let them know you care about them. Let them know that God cares about them. And just be there for them. That's the main thing. Be there for them whenever they need you. And even if they don't, just being there, just show up.
Just show up keeps coming up, doesn't it?
Just show up, yeah. And, like I said, and I was looking for, I always, when I go to games and stuff, I always look for the kids I know, and it's fun.
I thank you for what you did for student ministry. I thank you for what you did for me personally.
Thank you.
And for my family all those years. But student ministry carries on through a lifetime, and it carries out beyond your lifetime. Hank, thank you so much. Youth Worker Nation, thanks for listening. Love you, buddy.
Thank you, sir. Love you too, man.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.